Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Way T Lightheart with Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we have a very special guest. We're going to talk about how to build a business in the health and wellness space and how to pivot. In this case, our guest pivoted from being a chiropractor to being a podcaster. And that might seem like an unusual jump, but in today's world, I think all of us need to consider about pivoting into maybe a new career, a new business, a new opportunity, maybe a new location. Who knows? Very uncertain times. So that's why we are doing this podcast, because health is about a lot of these things. And of course, our guest today is Jesse Chappus, who is a lifelong learner and continually researches the most current information on nutrition and natural health. In April of 2016, he retired from the chiropractic business after being in clinical practice for 4.5 years. He decided it was time to take his message, his health message, online to reach a larger audience. So Jesse has always had an active lifestyle. He used to focus on long distance running, marathons and cycling, but now he has a more holistic approach to movement and fitness. He is a firm believer in the proactive model of health, and he has a tremendous podcast called the ultimatehealthpodcast.com, which you can reach also on Instagram. Jesse, welcome to the show.
Wade, excited to be here. How you doing?
It's as Charles Dickens once said, it's the best of times and the worst of times. Things have never been better at Bioptimizers, and of course, we are dealing with the politicization. We talked a little bit before this of the science and everybody, and I think there's a lot of fear and a lot of pressure, both socially and disinformation and stuff that's going out there. And we need podcasters like yourself who are actually breaking down information so that people can understand and take action, right? I think we've become, in some ways, voyeurs in society. We've gotten used to looking at our screens so much that we're getting the feedback of, I'm doing something because I learned something, but really the mastery is when you take action. Would you agree with that?
I would totally agree with that. And I find even after, taking in the knowledge and applying that into a healthy lifestyle, one of the trickiest things can be doing that long term, because there is so much out there, and whether it be, meditation or a certain diet, or we could go on and on. I find that to be the trickiest piece. It's not knowing what to do. It's not even taking it once you're inspired from like a conversation like we're going to have here, but it's like, how do you put that into place long term? And that's something that even myself, I've been involved in this world for so long, and I still, dip in and out, have my ebbs and flows with different pieces of this health and wellness package.
Yeah, I always like to say, I was just actually writing an email to a group of people, and I was like, it's the title's like, you've been hacked. And not in a good way. I think people's decision-making process is getting into analysis paralysis. And, you can kind of find supporting information for almost anything, but how do you get practical information that's implementable in your life? And of course, as a chiropractor, your history back there is you're taking people and implementing a philosophy to help them have a better quality of life, better health and everything. But I find it interesting. So I want to back the truck up a little bit and go back into your history for our listeners. What got you into chiropractic care? What was your career like in it? And then what made you to change? Because that's a big time, energy, emotional, financial investment to become a chiropractor and build a clinic and all that stuff. Like that's a major thing. And then to walk away and become a podcaster, like, I'm sure there were some people shaking their heads or like questioning what you're doing. Like, how did you get involved in that whole industry to start with?
And this is a number of years ago. You talked about the pandemic we're going through now, and a lot of people are making a lot of pivots within their career. Some people are probably forced to, other people are probably evaluating, situations that they've been involved in, and realizing there might be a better option. But for me, this all started, the podcast, I want to get the timeline right here. The podcast started 6.5 years ago.
Okay.
And at that time, I was a practicing chiropractor already for a couple of years. But let's go back even further than that. You asked about getting into chiropractic. I've always just had a passion for health and wellness. And I took kinesiology in university and just loved learning about the body, physiology, anatomy, just always just so fascinated by that. And I loved that program. And for quite a while, I thought I'd get into physiotherapy after that, and had an opportunity to do a co-op under a chiropractor while I was in school, while I was in university, and realized, I really like this chiropractic thing, and pivoted my focus a little bit into chiropractic. And just during going to chiropractic school, it was through YouTube that I found like this alternative health world beyond, even though chiropractic's alternative, it's still, kind of under the conventional umbrella with a lot of the teachings and the science. And I mean, science is science, but just the way that we learn, it's still pretty conventional. But just through YouTube, I ended up dipping into the raw food world, eating plant-based, and dipped my toe into that world, and actually went vegan for a while and ate a lot of raw foods. But it opened my mind during chiropractic school after I'd already made that commitment, and I've already invested so much time and money into kinesiology. And then I'm already halfway through this other program. But, I, at that point, still figured I was going to come out and practice chiropractic, and that would be my lifelong career. And when I came out, I got into practice, slowly built that practice up, and loved a lot of things about that. I mean, I'm a people person. I love, interacting with people one-on-one, and I would take my time with patients and teach them a lot of these alternative tidbits I was picking up in the online world and through my readings I was doing. And when I met my girlfriend, now wife, I knew like she was a nutritionist, and we both had this passion for health. So this is like maybe a year or so into practice, and I'm beyond the chiropractic school here. I'm out in practice doing my thing. And I just brought it up to her. I was into consuming podcasts at that point, and I was like, we should start a podcast. And she didn't maybe even know what a podcast was at that time. She definitely wasn't very immersed in that world. So it took a bit of convincing. It took some time. But over time, I convinced her to start a show. And it was September 2014. My wife and I started co-hosting the Ultimate Health podcast together. And it was quite a while that we did that while I was in practice. So in the beginning, I'm practicing during the day. If I have breaks in between patients, I'm like editing the show and lining up guests, taking care of emails. There's a lot too. And obviously as a podcast host, there's a lot to the podcasting thing. It's not just jumping on and doing a recording and then hitting post. I mean, maybe we'll get into that later, but there's a lot involved in running a show. So again, I'm practicing full time. I'm actually in a long distance relationship. So my girlfriend's not even in the same city. So we're recording the show on weekends. We're about 4 hours apart, traveling back and forth on weekends, recording on weekends. And it's just a grind. I mean, I'm in practice, again, treating people, loving that aspect. But over time, I'm realizing as the show continued to grow that I just have such a passion for this medium. And it's just reaching so many different people all over the world. And I just love the fact that I could create a piece of content and it just had this evergreenness to it that working one-on-one with patients just wasn't able to do. Like I'm able to really help people in a different way working with them in person, but I think I can have more of an impact trying to, grow this podcast and put more and more energy into it. And, that's what eventually happened. It was just more and more of my time and energy would go into the show. It grew to a point where we could take on our first sponsor. I think it was, about a year into the show. So in the beginning, you're paying to host and paying to do all this stuff and working hard and it's not paying at all, but it's a pure passion project for the two of us. Mm-hmm. And then because of a prior relationship my wife had with the company, we ended up getting a sponsor. I think that's pretty early, a year into, creating this podcast and this content. So, and that wasn't a lot of money at the time, but it was a start, and it planted a seed to see, the potential. And over time, it just grew and grew, and it got to the point where it could sustain us. Well, I want to take a step back. She actually had another career teaching vegetarian cooking classes at the time. I mentioned she was a nutritionist. So she was doing that. And it got to the point where I could actually leave my practice, do the podcast full time, and then she could do her teaching. And then over time, again, growing the show, putting more and more focus into it, she was able to leave that. And the two of us were able to do this full time. And now, I mean, there's a baby involved. We recently had a child about 14, 15 months ago now. So that's why she's no longer hosting, and she's taken on her own podcast and started it on mothering and babies. And that's her new passion. And now I've taken the reins on the Ultimate Health podcast, and I love it. All I can say is I love it. I feel so grateful to get to connect with people and read the books, preparing for the interviews, and continuing to learn and share that information, like I mentioned before, with such a wide audience. So I'm not only learning it for myself to apply in my own life and with my family and friends, but being able to take that and put it out into the world as evergreen content that continues to get downloaded and listened to. And now we're on YouTube as well, and getting a lot of people subscribing to the channel. And that's a whole nother area of growth and passion of mine.
Super great to hear that. And I guess there's a couple things that come up. You kind of grew things organically here in this situation, right? Like you kind of come to a point, like what was it like though, that decision point where you said, I'm going to leave chiropractic? How was that? Was it an easy decision? Was it a difficult decision?
It was easy knowing I was doing the right thing, but financially it was tight. It was giving up, a certain amount of income. I was still growing my practice at that time. It wasn't, I wasn't 10 years in and had a full practice or anything, but it was significant. I was doing well for how long I'd been in practice, but it was taking, a step back in finances and what I was bringing in on a regular basis. So that part was something to consider. But at the time we didn't have a child, and we were younger, and we could afford to take a little bit more risk than we could these days. So it was, we could see the growth, and we had done it for long enough that we knew where this was going. But things were tight for a while, and we knew that going into it, but we could see the bigger picture.
I think that's really great to be able to make that pivot and go into an extension of your career. Essentially, it was an extension of what you were doing, just like you said, to have more impact, but being willing to take the short-term financial sacrifices in order to free up the time to really grow the business. I think there's a great lesson there for people. I'm kind of interested about your thoughts around health and vocation. So I don't know, a lot of people look at what they're doing in life, and they're doing it for the money, and they rationalize it. Well, I need this job for this XYZ, and it's a very strong argument, right? I mean, it's always a strong argument, and yet it can suck the life out of you. It can take the soul away from you. And having treated so many people in your past, you probably became familiar with kind of people that are going through the motions of life. What would you say, out of curiosity, is the role of a job or a gainful employment or your purpose in life that's in alignment with your core values as opposed to a financial outcome? How much do you think that contributes to your overall state of well-being and health?
It's huge for me. The fact that, again, I get to learn about what I would be learning about anyways. Again, I go really in depth preparing for my interviews, and a lot of times it's authors I'm interviewing in the health and wellness space. And these are books I would just be soaking up and digging into anyways. So, and having these conversations and picking people's brains and continuing to learn. I mean, it is so phenomenal. I can't really express. It's like everything is so aligned with what I get to do. The fact that I get to learn, I get to make money doing something I love doing. I get to help people at the same time. It's so much gratitude. And I'm so aware of that and talk about it all the time. It's just there's luck involved too, and timing, and again, I mentioned before, there was a time that I could take a risk when I did take the
Right.
risk on this. And now I can't necessarily take the same risks I could with a young daughter, and I'm married now, and it's just, we have a family. It's different. But I just feel so grateful that early on in my career, before I had, invested, 10, 20 years and built up that practice, it was like I saw this other out. And I can't say I started when we started the podcast, that was apparent to me that there would be an opportunity to even find an out. But it was just something that was so organic, and it just involved me and my wife following something we were so passionate about. And all I can say is just gratitude. I mean, I can't think of anything, including the way we make our revenue with the business. Like, it's all just so beautiful. We're sharing products that we take and love. And that's how we generally make money, through sponsorship and affiliate links. So it's like we're helping people, we're making money doing that. And it's win, 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 win all around. And that's all I can say. It's just, I'm very grateful.
When it comes to the Ultimate Health podcast, so what would you say is your overall goal or structure for people who are tuning into the podcast? Like, what it's about? What would you say your core message is, and what are you hoping to communicate to people so that they can implement? Like how does that all fit within the podcast?
Well, one thing we learned early on is that there are so many different avenues in the health and wellness space, and new ones that are opening all the time.
Mhm.
And a lot of them, contradict other ones. So early
Apparently, yeah, it looks that way, but
early on, we decided we were just going to interview people across the spectrum, even if we knew that the philosophy didn't totally align. I mean, there would be no way that the philosophy, if you look back at the previous guests, we've done over 400 interviews now, and there would be no way they could all align under one philosophy. I don't even know how it'd be possible. But I mean, we've had raw vegans on, and the other end of the spectrum, carnivores, and everything in between. And I think every one of these guests has so many different nuggets to offer the listener. And it's all about taking in that information and seeing where you're at as a unique individual, and where you're at on your path, which again, over a lifetime is going to change as well. And taking those nuggets and experimenting with them, seeing what works for you, and then holding on to those, like we talked about at the beginning, and making them habits and making them part of the health and wellness routine. But yeah, that's been a big part of the avenue we've taken over the years. And I think that's different than a lot of the other shows, where they kind of pick an alley, and again, there's it's just going to limit the number of people that you can interview. For us, it's like, I don't want to play that game. I don't want to play the game of trying to decide for you who you should be listening to. It's like, let's just bring everybody on that is bringing a unique piece to this health and wellness space, and let people decide for themselves, including myself. As I'm reading these books and chatting with these people, I'm changing up my routine all the time. I mean, whatever I would talk about today, it could be different in a week from now, day from now. Like, pieces are always changing. And I think that's a big part of, you know, for me at least, embracing this health and wellness space, realizing that the learning never ends. There are so many different avenues to take. And like I said, again, we're all different. We're all going through different phases.
Right. So would you say, though, there are some overarching from all the 400 guests plus that you've interviewed? Would you say that there are some themes that come through for people who want to express ultimate health that you've kind of noticed that are kind of part and parcel with everybody?
Sure. Yeah, there would definitely be themes. And one of them that comes to mind right away is no big surprise. And that's the thing about, I think, a lot of the general themes. They're the cliche things that you'd hear time and time again. The fundamentals. So, drinking clean water and eating a clean diet, whatever that is for you, taking time for self-care and moving your body on a regular basis. They're not sexy things that are like
Yes.
profound and things that, are exciting necessarily to talk about, because we've all heard them so many times, but these do build the foundation for a healthy lifestyle. You can't deny them. Trying to think of other ones off the top of my head. Sleep. That's one that comes up time and time again, getting your sleep right. And a thing that I've really found over the years is that's worked well for me is testing the extreme on a lot of these things.
Yes.
And then over time coming back to the middle. So,
I want to get into that for a second.
Okay.
If I can interject.
Yeah.
Because I'm very much of that belief as well. And I call it the Formula One formula. And that is, if you look at Formula One race cars, they're driving around the track at a couple hundred miles an hour, going through these crazy hairpin turns, and it's very dangerous, and you could die in that whole kind of experiment. Yet the technologies that's developed by developing engines and performance and tires and braking systems and technology and all these sort of stuff, that when you push the limit of race car driving, then those applications have really positive ramifications for whether it's fuel efficiency for the environment, whether it's braking systems that help you stop the car in an emergency situation, new tires that gives you better traction in poor conditions. There's always gains to come from those people that are on the edge. And I think that's why we need people on the edge in every area of society, the freedom of expression and people to push the envelope. And yes, there's risks involved for those individuals, but the overarching benefit for society is certain, or it's a fact. Whether it's people jumping out of planes or flying, trying to break the sound barrier, or all these different things that throughout history, astronauts, the explorers that went to the New World, all these kind of things are people on the extremes. What are some of the extreme things that you've done in experimentation that you learned a lesson that you're able to kind of come back from the adventure or the dysfunction or the breakdown or whatever it was and come back to the middle? You got any that come to mind?
Well, I mentioned earlier diet, and I've experimented with diets right across the board, from the raw food diet to more keto diet. And again, like I mentioned, coming to the middle, that's kind of where I am now. It's like the basics. Again, it's not sexy to talk about, but it's like eating organic and whole foods. And I don't really have a certain paradigm that I fit under when it comes to that, but it's like I'm just eating clean foods all the time. It's just a default. Like I won't give up. I'm looking for a certain word here. There's no choice in that matter. It's just default for me now. And I would say another one is just pushing the limit a lot. And this comes back to what we talked about before of having too much on my plate when I was building the show with my wife, where, I mentioned working all day and even between patients working on the show, and then coming home at night and pushing it till, maybe 11 o'clock at night, getting things together for the podcast, then waking up and doing it again. And then on the weekend, I was doing most of the traveling. So I would do the 4-hour trek to go meet my girlfriend at the time. And it was redlining. I was pushing really hard. And now I can look back at that time and realize the importance of balance. And I'm lucky enough to be in a position now where, I've been able to say no to a lot more things and build, go all in on this show. And that's something I'm just so big on, focusing in on what it is that you do well and that you love to do. And I've been an advocate of this for years. I'm a big fan of focus. If I had to pick one word in business that I would stand behind, it's focus. And I think that's a big part of the success of the show, where it's like, when somebody asks me what I do, I say I'm a podcaster. It's not a podcast is a piece of what I do. Like I'm all in on this. And that's the kind of personality I am. I'm an all in type of person. And I'm always wanting to learn, not just in the health and wellness space. I want to learn about podcasting and the newest software we can use to get better quality interviews or better sound, or, I'm into the art of podcasting just as much as the health and wellness information. So I kind of took it on a tangent there, but to go over a couple of them, the diet, I've been across the board and experimenting with the extremes there. And then I've pushed into the red line quite a bit in the work realm, and out of necessity at the time to get things to where they are today, I had to really push, and now I have so much gratitude for the balance that I do have and that I've, worked so hard to have at this time and to enjoy.
I love it. I think, there's a lot of growth that happens in that red line when you get to, as an entrepreneur and trying to keep care of your health and all that sort of stuff. Almost everyone I've ever interviewed gets to the point where things start to break down, but it's kind of like that external pressure. It helps you get clarity about what's working and what's not working. I think it's easy to kind of go through kind of a fuzzed out world. Well, it's kind of like, but when you really push it into your max, you find out where the limits are. And then those limits, you're like, okay, I've got to make some adjustments. One of the adjustments that you talk about is you were an endurance runner. Is that right?
Yes. Did a number of marathons and was really heavy into that world for a number of years.
What was that like?
I started getting really into running in chiropractic school. So it was, I'm trying to think how many years back that was, maybe like 12 years back now. And again, I'm an all-in type of person. So when I got into running, I saw the marathon there and saw that as being the gold standard of what I wanted to excel in. And yeah, I was all in. I was running probably 6 days a week and putting in huge amount of kilometers. And I was also eating a plant-based diet at the time. So for me, I really, really leaned out with the two of those together.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there's so many different ways. I know you're plant-based. We talked about this on my show when I interviewed you, but there's so many different ways to do a plant-based diet. But what I was doing at the time, plus running all those kilometers, I got pretty thin.
Mm-hmm.
And it probably didn't help, the situation of how demanding chiropractic college was. And it's a whole nother world of busy on top of what I had already experienced at university. So it was an interesting time to get involved in that. But I just loved the competition. I loved having, a goal, and it kept me fit. And I ended up doing, I think it was 6 or 7 marathons within a handful of years.
Wow.
And then just realized like, this isn't healthy for me. This is, I get a lot out of the challenge of it and the competition. I mean, I wasn't competitive like I'm going to win the race, but I had my own goals, and I felt like I was doing really well considering where like the amount of time I'd invested and how seriously I took it. But I just realized like, I'm all about health and wellness and doing what's going to make me feel good. And this was, if you're looking at like a U curve, I was pushing it so hard. It was affecting my health, I'm sure, the other way. Right. I can't say I had overt symptoms from doing it, but I felt like I was underweight where I wanted to be. And I was depleted. I would run sometimes on Sunday when I would do the long runs, it could be up to like, I think my longest might have been like 5.5 hours. So you're hungry and depleted all the time. And it was a lot. So enjoyed it at the time, got a lot from that. And I'm proud of, what I accomplished in that realm. But now I'm a runner, and I more recently really picked it up in a more serious way, but it's shorter runs. It's doing it for health and wellness and well-being. It's not competing. And so the goals are different. And I think that served me well at the time. I learned, I'm sure, a lot of lessons in handling pain, running those marathons. And I'm not sure if you've done a marathon yourself, but
I haven't done a marathon yet. It's always in the back of my mind that I keep thinking, God, I probably should go do that just to get it off the list.
Right. It takes you to a level of pain that maybe I would say was probably helpful as an entrepreneur, just to experience that and realize, just like any kind of pain, you come out the other end stronger. So I feel like it was good for me at the time, and I got a lot from that. But then now I'm all into fitness and exercise and movement from a health perspective versus a competitive.
So what are some of the other things that you're currently doing in regards to your health now that so you run how many times a week, let's say?
Probably about 4 or 5 right now.
Okay, well, that's quite a bit. And then your average run would be?
I'm only doing, like I said, lately they've been about half an hour. So it's more about just fitness. It's not like I'm
cardio
right? Kilometers or anything. Yeah, exactly. And I'm just big into kettlebells. I'm big into body weight exercises, really basic stuff. And I guess that's going to be a theme here where it's like, I've experimented at the extremes, but I've come back to the basics and the fundamentals and find that they do me well.
When you're talking about kettlebells, it's a big, I think became very popular, particularly when Pavel Datsuin brought I think he got published through Dragon Door or something like that about 25 years ago. And here is this guy with this crazy abdominal development. He had one of the most unusual abdominal developments I've ever seen. And then I remember seeing him at the Arnold Classic, I think in 1998, 1999, something around there. So it's a big bodybuilding and fitness show run by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I remember looking at him and going, wow, this guy's got a very interesting development. He wasn't like super big, but his strength with these kettlebells were phenomenal. Like what he was throwing around these kettlebells. And I was like, these things are really tough. And me being at those days, I was a big bulky bodybuilder, and the weighting and the movement of kettlebell movements is so much different than, say, barbells or dumbbells. It's a completely different thing. What have you learned about kettlebells, and why has that become part of your routine? Because, as a chiropractor and as a former runner, I think that's a very interesting combination. That say, hey, I've found that, kettlebells is something that I implement that you implement in your routine. Why is that? And what are some of the movements that you like the best?
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip, rapid cheat meal relief. Research shows that cheat meals can actually be an effective way to boost your metabolism. One key weight loss hormone, leptin, can be increased by up to 30% following a cheat meal. The challenge with the cheat meals is that all those extra calories and lower food quality can be hard to digest, which means you could be totally sidelined with a food coma after big cheat meals. The solution is to take strong digestive enzymes like masszymes, which will help rapidly digest and break down the extra food. 3 to 5 capsules before or right after your cheat meal can make a huge difference in how you feel following the cheat meal. If it's a cheat day with multiple large meals, you might want to go up to 10 capsules or higher to help you power through all that food. To save 10% on masszymes, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and enter the code CHEAT10 at checkout.
I'm really basic with it, to be honest. And the reason, I would say the primary reason that I do it is because it is so easy to fit into my routine and I can hit so many muscles within one movement. I actually keep a kettlebell here in the office, and then in between, you know, doing work, I'll pick it up and do some swings. So it's, you know, my fitness routine at this point, you know, again, it's basic. It's not, I'm not deep into the weeds on the kettlebells, but I do basic swings, 1 arm, 2 arm. I mean, I've done some other things back in the day, but now it's all basics, and efficiency is a big part of that. And just,
Yeah.
I just enjoy it too. It's something that I don't resist doing. And I think that's a big part of creating consistency as well. I feel good after I do it. And it's just an easy thing to fit into my routine. What about you? Are you a big fan of them, or do you use them?
No, I got a little bit of kettlebells. I'm still one of the old school bodybuilding guys that likes to go lift iron, and I always say lift heavy inanimate objects in linear planes, which is kind of I'm a very boring. Um, I have some kettlebells here at the house because I have a rooftop gym that I built during COVID, which actually turned out to be pretty fun. It's really nice. I've got a nice view of Venice here, and I get up there and looking at the palm trees and the sun and the ocean. I'm like, oh, okay, now I know why they started Muscle Beach down here back in the day. This is a great way. Training outdoors is remarkably different than training indoors. And so I split my time between here and Gold's Gym. I'm always fascinated with kettlebells, though, is because it builds such a unique level of whole body strength, which is very different than, say, bodybuilding, which is kind of, bodybuilding is all about the aesthetics, I would say, where kettlebells is more about the functionality. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I would say it's more incorporating functional movement versus an isolated muscle. So, I mean, and I've been involved in more so back in the day, but doing a lot of more isolated movements and weightlifting that way too. Not even near to the extent you have, but just in keeping fit and getting strong.
What about other biohacking modalities, food? Like, so what's your current diet style like today? And then maybe any biohacking modalities that you tend to advocate? And do you and your wife follow a similar type diet, or you got a difference?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, because I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but my wife and I, when we met each other, we were both heavily involved in the health and wellness space, and that's how we met. And both of us were on a plant-based diet at the time. And we were both advocating that heavily for ourselves and as a way for other people, you know, to be healthy. And my wife actually wrote the book Plant-Based Diet for Dummies. And so she was just totally immersed in that and sharing that message. And then just over the years, you know, we pivoted and started incorporating some chicken and fish, and now it's there's no, I think I quickly mentioned this before, but there's no specific, I guess if I had to put a label on it, I would call it a paleo-ish diet, but it's just all about quality. So like, we're not going out and getting, you know, if we're going to a restaurant and they have like crappy conventional meat, we'll eat plant-based for that meal. We typically, my wife's also a chef, so we eat at home a lot, and she loves to cook, and she's an amazing cook. So I'm really lucky that way. But yeah, especially when it comes to meat, it always has to be grass-fed or organic, top quality. And whenever we can, we buy organic produce. It's just whole foods. I mean, it's basic stuff, but we feel like at this time it's the best for us. And yeah, we're always tweaking with different things, learning about new foods, and it's just the health and wellness space these days. Things are just changing so fast, and new foods are being brought to the forefront. There's always new things to try and new supplements. So it's a lot of fun just keeping up with that and experimenting and trying different things. But I would say part of what fits under the eating umbrella for me, something I've done more seriously over, I'd say, the last 6 months, is intermittent fasting. And for me, I do that. Typically, I do that during the week. So I'll eat dinner with the family, and we usually eat an earlier dinner just because I do have a young daughter. So we'll eat maybe about 5:30 on average. And most nights during the week, I won't have anything after that until the next day around, earliest I would say I would eat would be about 11 a.m. Oftentimes I'll stretch that to noon. And again, I'm not hardcore about that. If all of a sudden we decide one day we're going to make gluten-free pancakes and have a family breakfast, like, I don't like to be too rigid. I like to be rigid about the basics. Like, I'm not just, eating crap, but if it's healthy food and it's like, I can see an opportunity to have a fun meal with the family, I think the pros outweigh the con in that situation. So, and especially on weekends, the weekends we'll go to a healthy restaurant, have brunch together, and we'll often make like pancakes or something like that, and do it as a family, and just enjoy that whole experience, put music on and just make it a whole event. But I do enjoy, just giving my body a break by doing the intermittent fasting, giving it a break. I mean, back even when I was eating healthy, I was somebody that always would snack in between meals, and it was always good quality food, but it was always thinking about food and always putting food in my body. And there's just so much freedom that comes with intermittent fasting, where you're just like, okay, that's not like, I know I'm planning on going till 11 or 12, and it's like, okay, I'm going to sit down and go get some work done. It's like one less thing to think about, and it's giving my body a break, because I think we're just constantly working our bodies, and digestion is just, eating up so much of our energy. So I like the idea of giving my body that break, and then taking that window between noon and say 6 p.m. and just enjoying healthy foods during that time. I do like to avoid snacking when possible, but I'm not hardcore about it. If we're making a healthy family snack or whatnot, I'm going to partake in it. And it's, I've just found over the years, moderation is good for the well-being.
Any biohacks or technologies or things that you like to do? Like, some people are into saunas, some people are ice baths, some people use PMF devices, some people use blue light blockers. I mean, there's an endless array of things. Anything that you incorporate in your life on any of those areas?
I am a big fan of, we have an infrared sauna at home. I'm out of the routine of using it right now. And actually it's kind of funny, since we had our child, we've built like a play area for her that kind of blocks the sauna. So it's been my excuse / physical barrier that kind of blocks it. So I'm out of the routine of using it, but I do get into routines where that becomes a regular thing and part of my routine. I think it's hugely valuable. And then you mentioned,
are you in the morning or the night? Which do you prefer?
I usually do night. I'll do night when everybody's kind of simmering down and it's quiet, and I'll put a podcast on, or watch something educational on my phone in there. And I am big on that too, when I can stack healthy habits like that, where I can take in information and, in that case, biohack. And I like to stack things like that. If I'm going for a walk, I like to put a podcast on, and not to the point again where it gets too intense, because you can take that too far and then become, you can have so many inputs and it could become stressful. But it's like, for me, like if I'm doing sauna or going for a walk, I think putting something educational on is definitely something I like to do. And you mentioned blue light blocking, and I'm a big fan of blue light glasses at night. My wife and I just have them out, and it's a no-brainer. You just get used to it. And we just, if we're going to watch a Netflix show or something together at night, we'll pop those on and just make sure we're not exposing our eyes to the blue light before we go to sleep, affecting our sleep and our melatonin production. That's just over the years become a no-brainer for us, and we incorporate that. What about you? Are you into the glasses, the blue light blocking glasses?
Yeah, here's my other ones I got on. These are the ones that kind of like the day ones. And
I typically don't wear the day ones. But I'm adamant about wearing the nighttime ones.
Yeah, it's I'm very blessed on the sleep program. Like, for whatever reason, I don't have too much trouble sleeping, and and I don't require a lot of sleep like a lot of people. 6-7 hours is great for me. If I sleep more than that, I get groggy. And I typically will do infrared at night as well, as opposed to earlier in the day. Some people like to start the day with it. So I think you have to kind of find out what your jam is or your groove. Any other devices that you like to use or to tech?
Trying to think devices. I'm into red light therapy. I have a Juve device.
Yes.
That's something I'm not into the routine of using right now. Being totally transparent about that. But I have gone through periods where I've been very serious about using that. And I think it's a great device.
Feels great. It feels great. Red lights.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. There's a definite sense when you're under red light that's okay. Something good is happening to me here.
And for me, that's more of a morning thing. I like to have either a morning coffee or tea, go down in front of the device, again, put on a podcast and just enjoy that time. But again, this ties back into what we talked about before. How do you make that a regular part? I mean, you can't just keep adding in. It's like you have to find what's most valuable to you and make that a regular part of your healthy routine. And I think I'm going through somewhat of a unique thing. I mean, there's lots of dads out there with young kids, but I am going through a different period of my life right now versus a couple of years ago before I had a young child, where, getting in front of the red light device and making that more of a routine was an easier, more regular occurrence. So that we're talking about these things that have kind of like ebbed and flowed, and the sauna and the Juve right now are kind of on a hiatus. But again, that's partially because again, just time in general, and with a young child, it's prioritizing, and I always prioritize the family. So
any tests or other gear that you use to kind of modulate or monitor health parameters, or things that you think people should be paying attention to?
I'm a big fan of the Aura Ring. I've used that now for over a year. I love tracking my sleep. I love the fact that you can put it in airplane mode and it's not emitting, EMFs when you're wearing it throughout the day. Do you have one?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, a big fan of that. And I love how you can test different things, especially when it comes to sleep. So you can, you could take a product like your magnesium and, take that for a few nights, see the effect on your sleep. And then maybe, like we talked about the sauna, like try the sauna in the morning, see how you sleep for a few days, try the sauna at night, see how you sleep. And I like the idea of having objective data, because a lot of stuff, when you really get involved in the health and wellness space, things start accumulating and you keep adding in, whether it be supplements or different, again, biohacks and stuff. And it's like, it gets a little bit muddy on what is doing what. So I like the fact that the Aura Ring gives you that objective data, and you can play with different things and then see what again is working for your unique biology.
100%. I think that's anytime that you have a feedback loop inside of an experiment, and data collection provides insight that you can track and make definitive decisions when your brain can't remember. Most people can't remember what happened 2 days ago, or let alone 2 weeks ago, and start to track trends. And then, of course, there's genetic variance for people. And so, for example, you can run a wife and a husband that are running different parameters, or taking the same supplements, or doing the same philosophy, and they have completely different results for both those individuals. And I think one of the challenges that people naturally gravitate towards, they get kind of like, well, that worked for this famous person, it should work for me, or so and so said this, but that didn't work for me. So then they throw the baby out with the bathwater, because they're not accounting for genetic individuality or epigenetical expression, because of maybe contaminants or non-contaminants or something, all these kind of mutations that happen. Do you guys do any testing, hormones, anything like that you monitor?
It's been a while, but we've done a lot of testing with the functional medicine doc back back in the day, a few years back. But we work with a functional medicine team, and we are due to do the whole gamut of tests again. It's not something we've kept up with over the years, but we have our baseline, and I want to get more regular with that, because I do see good value in that, looking for parasites and checking hormones, like you said. And there's, again, like the Oura Ring, it's objective data for all this, healthy living that we're doing. And it's important to see. And there could be something in a blind spot, like a parasite, or who knows, there's living healthy, but there could be a blind spot that you're not noticing.
Yeah, I just finished a whole series of parameters to test. Like I just did the whole gamut with all this craziness going on in the world, with the mitigations involved around the planet. I was like, I need to do the whole gambit. And so I just ran all the gamut. I'm still waiting for a couple tests to come back, but I find it's very reassuring as well, as you're able to catch things beforehand, or you're able to see potential risk factors that you can adjust one's lifestyle towards to mitigate whatever your genetic mutations. Genetics doesn't dictate the whole thing. It gets expressed, and you can manage that through lifestyle. Any other lifestyle pieces that you think helps people get to the Ultimate Health Podcast, your philosophy that you think is really mission critical for people?
Coming back to the basics again, hydration. Are you drinking enough water? Are you starting your day with a nice glass of filtered water? Do you have filtration on your water? I'm a big fan of the Berkey water filtration system, and we've been using that for years and feel really good about it. We also have the Berkey shower filters, so the water that we're showering in is filtered. I think that's a big one that a lot of people can miss. And it's just so easy. Once you know about it and you order the filters and see how easy they are to install, it's like you just put in your calendar when you need to replace it. And it's I think obviously through both your drinking water and the water you're bathing in, having proper hydration is foundational.
So good. Any last words and where people can find you here for our audience, and about the Ultimate Health Podcast, where they can reach you, how they can find out, or anything that you'd like to share with our audience?
No, other than, if you're watching this, like I mentioned before, putting out interviews now on YouTube. So go and check those out. If you're listening to this, there's over 400 episodes of the Ultimate Health Podcast you can go back and listen to. And pretty soon your episode is set to go live. Wait on our show. And I'm excited to share our conversation with everybody. And just go and check out the information that we've been putting out for a lot of years. We're really passionate about it, as I'm sure you can tell. And just reach out if you have any questions, or if you want to connect, and I'll keep doing what I do.
Awesome. Well, there you have it, folks. Jesse Chappus in the Ultimate Health Podcast, sharing, it's not as complicated as you think. You got to get the basics, but you got to do the basics regularly. Make the pivots in life that you need to make to live your best life. And I want to thank you for joining us this edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. I'm Wei T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers. I'm wishing you a super healthy, awesome day. And of course, take good care of your health. It's your best investment.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip. Turn cultured foods into superfoods. Raw fermented foods like sauerkraut and low sugar, live yogurt can be good for you, but rarely have enough of the right probiotic strains for therapeutic benefit. So here's a way that you can turn them into superfoods. What I do is I get some raw sauerkraut or a healthy yogurt. Ideally, it's grass-fed or coconut-based, and you can empty 3 caps of P3OM into a container and mix it up thoroughly. Leave it at room temperature for a couple of hours before putting it back into the fridge. And what's going to happen is these probiotic levels will be multiplied. In fact, it doubles every 20 minutes. And then what you're going to get is you're going to have a food with strong proteolytic activity. To learn more about P3OM and why its patented strains make it the strongest probiotic available, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.